You are sitting here, reading these words, and it feels obvious that you are inside a real world. You feel the weight of your body. You see colors, shapes, faces, light. You hear sounds. It all feels solid, stable, unquestionable. Yet what if none of this is happening where you think it is? What if the world you are so certain about is not being delivered to you from the outside, but is being quietly, continuously built from the inside out? Every second, your brain is making millions of invisible decisions about what you are seeing, hearing, and feeling. It does not wait for reality to arrive and then simply report it to you. It predicts, it guesses, it fills in gaps, it corrects itself. And then it presents the result to you as something that feels like an external world, even though it is in fact an internal story. You never experience the world directly. You experience a model of the world that your brain constructs for you, a private simulation that feels real enough to become your reality. When you look at a tree, you are not seeing the tree itself. You are seeing your brain's best guess of what that tree should look like based on memory, expectation, context, and sensory fragments. Perception feels like something that happens to you, as if the world arrives at your senses fully formed and your mind simply opens the door and lets it in. But this feeling hides a much deeper and far stranger process that is unfolding beneath your awareness, because what you experience is seeing, hearing, touching, tasting. And feeling is not a clean transmission of reality, but a carefully constructed internal simulation that your brain is continuously generating in order to keep you alive and oriented. Every color you see, every sound you hear, every sense of space, depth, movement, and meaning is the result of your brain actively interpreting incomplete signals and turning them into a story that feels coherent and stable, even though the raw information arriving from your senses is fragmented, noisy, delayed, and uncertain. And because the brain cannot afford to wait for perfect information, it does what all survival systems must do. It predicts, it fills in, it assumes, and it corrects itself in real time. From the moment light touches your eyes, it does not travel straight into awareness as a finished image. Instead, it becomes electrical impulses that travel through layers of neural processing where edges are extracted. Motion is estimated, depth is inferred, and missing details are supplied by memory and expectation long before you consciously see. Anything your brain has already decided what it thinks is most likely present, and what finally reaches your awareness is not raw reality, but your brain's best current guess, shaped by past experience, emotional relevance, cultural learning, and biological priorities, which is why the same physical stimulus can feel comforting to one person and threatening to another, beautiful to one and meaningless to another, because the brain is not asking what is objectively there. It is asking what is important, what is dangerous, what is useful, what is familiar. This process does not only apply to vision, it governs every sense you possess. When you hear a sound, your brain predicts what it should be before it finishes arriving. When you feel pain, your brain evaluates threat before the sensation becomes fully conscious. When you taste food, your brain compares it to memories long before you decide whether you like it. And when you sense your own body, your brain is constantly estimating your posture, balance, and internal state using partial data, and then presenting you with a feeling of being a stable physical self in a stable physical world. Even though that stability is something your brain is actively maintaining rather than something it is simply observing. The reason this construction feels invisible is because it works too well. It feels natural, automatic, and trustworthy. And your brain's greatest achievement is not accuracy, but usefulness. It does not care about showing you the world exactly as it is. It cares about showing you a version of the world that keeps you functioning, moving, eating, avoiding danger, forming relationships, and surviving. And if that means smoothing out uncertainty, exaggerating threats, simplifying complexity, or creating emotional meaning where none objectively exists, your brain will do so without hesitation, because your experience is not designed to be a photograph of reality. It is designed to be a survival interface. This is why illusions are so revealing, because they show that what feels solid and undeniable can shift with a simple change in context. A shadow can become a whole, a still image can appear to move, A sound can seem to come from a place it is not, and your certainty collapses instantly, not because reality changed, but because your brain changed its interpretation. And this reveals that perception is not anchored to the world in the way you assume. It is anchored to prediction models that your brain continuously updates based on what it thinks is most likely. And when those models change, your reality changes with them. Even your sense of time and continuity is constructed in this way. Your brain stitches together moments into a smooth flowing narrative, hiding gaps, delays, and jumps, so that you feel as if you are moving through a stable present, even though your experience is always slightly behind the physical world. Buffered, processed, and edited. And this editing creates the powerful illusion that you are directly in contact with reality, when in fact you are always interacting with a simulation that lags just enough to keep you unaware of the gap. Your emotions are also part of this construction. Fear is not simply a reaction to danger. It is your brain predicting harm and preparing your body before harm occurs. Joy is not simply a reaction to success. It is your brain signaling safety and opportunity. Sadness is not simply a response to loss. It is your brain adjusting expectations and energy use. And because these emotional states alter your predictions, they also alter what you perceive, which means your mood can literally change the world you experience, making the same place feel welcoming or hostile, empty or meaningful, safe or threatening, depending on the internal story your brain is telling at that moment. This active construction explains why your identity feels stable, even though your body and brain are constantly changing. Your brain maintains a model of who you are, what matters to you, what belongs to you, what threatens you, and what defines you. And this self-model becomes the center of your personal reality, shaping what you notice, what you ignore, what you remember, and what you believe. And because this model feels continuous, it creates the deep sense that there is a solid you, moving through a solid world, when in fact both the self and the world are being continuously generated by the same predictive machinery. When you begin to see perception as something your brain is actively doing, rather than something that simply happens to you, your relationship with reality begins to loosen. You realize that certainty is a feeling rather than a guarantee. That clarity is a construction rather than a mirror. That what you experience is not the world itself, but your brain's best survival-oriented story about the world. And this realization does not make reality meaningless. It makes it more intimate, because it reveals that every moment you live is not just happening around you, it is being built within you. What you experience as the outside world feels as if it is arriving fully formed, as though your eyes are windows and your ears are microphones, faithfully transmitting reality into your mind. But beneath this comfortable assumption is a far more delicate and astonishing process, because your brain is not waiting for the world to tell it what is happening. It is continuously predicting what should be happening, and then comparing those predictions with incoming sensory signals, adjusting its internal model moment by moment. And what you finally experience is not the world itself, but the brain's most efficient interpretation of it. A controlled hallucination that feels real precisely because it is tightly regulated by sensory feedback. Every second, your brain is running countless silent simulations of what it expects to see, hear, feel, and encounter next. These predictions are based on your memories, your habits, your emotional history, your biological needs, and the patterns your nervous system has learned across a lifetime. And when sensory data arrives, it does not simply create your experience. It acts as a correction signal, nudging your internal simulation toward what is most likely happening. And the balance between prediction and correction determines what you perceive, which means you are never seeing the raw world. You are seeing the version of the world your brain believes in most strongly at that moment. This is why perception can feel so vivid and convincing even when it is wrong, because your brain is not attempting to build a perfect replica of reality. It is building a useful one, a model that is good enough to guide action, avoid danger, and pursue opportunity. And when prediction dominates correction, your experience can drift away from what is physically present, giving rise to illusions, misinterpretations, and even hallucinations. And when correction dominates prediction, your experience becomes more anchored to incoming signals. But even then, it remains a constructed story rather than a direct feed. In everyday life, this controlled hallucination is so well calibrated that you rarely notice it. You walk through rooms without questioning whether the floor will support you. You recognize faces without calculating features. You navigate streets without consciously estimating distance, because your brain's predictions are constantly being confirmed by the world, reinforcing the feeling that what you see is simply what is there. But this stability is not a property of the world alone. It is a property of the alignment between your brain's expectations and the environment you are in. When this alignment is disrupted, the true nature of perception begins to show itself. Unfamiliar places can feel unsettling even when they are safe. Ambiguous shapes can look like threats in the dark. Silence can feel heavy. Shadows can seem alive. And in these moments, you can feel your brain searching for meaning, testing interpretations, trying to impose order on uncertainty. And when it chooses a particular interpretation, your body reacts to that choice as if it were objectively true. Your heart rate changes, your muscles tense, your attention narrows, all because your internal simulation has decided that a certain version of reality is the most likely. This process also explains why beliefs can feel as solid as physical facts, because beliefs shape predictions, and predictions shape perception. If you expect the world to be hostile, you will notice more threat. If you expect people to be kind, you will notice more warmth. If you expect yourself to fail, you will perceive more obstacles. And these perceptions then reinforce the original beliefs, creating a closed loop in which your internal model of the world quietly edits what you experience, not by inventing reality from nothing, but by selecting, amplifying, and interpreting what is already there. Your sense of self is part of this hallucinated world. You do not merely perceive an external environment, you also perceive a you within it, a body, a personality, a history, a set of desires and fears. And this self is also a model your brain constructs. It is the anchor point around which your predictions are organized, and it shapes what feels relevant, what feels personal, what feels meaningful. And because this self-model is woven into your perception of the world you experience is always a personal world, filtered through what matters to you, what you value, and what you fear. Even the feeling of being present in the moment is part of this construction. Your brain creates a sense of now. By integrating information across time, smoothing transitions and hiding delays so that your experience feels immediate and continuous. Even though it is always slightly behind the physical events it represents, and this editing gives you the powerful illusion that you are directly in contact with reality, when in fact you are always interacting with a carefully timed simulation that is just convincing enough to feel seamless. Understanding that your experience is a controlled hallucination does not mean that the world is fake or meaningless. It means that your access to it is mediated by a living, adaptive system that is constantly balancing prediction and evidence. And this balance is what makes your experience feel both stable and flexible, real and revisable, solid and yet strangely fragile. And once you see this, you begin to realize that the world you live in is not simply out there waiting to be perceived. It is being actively shaped by the stories your brain is telling itself in every moment. What makes your experience feel real is not the certainty of the world itself, but the confidence of the story your brain is telling you about it. Because your brain does not merely generate a picture of what it thinks is happening, it also assigns a sense of conviction to that picture, a feeling of, this is what is really going on. And that feeling is what gives your perceptions their authority, even though the processes that created them are hidden from you. And this authority is not granted by truth, but by internal coherence, by how well your brain's predictions align with one another and with your body's current state. Every moment your brain is evaluating countless possibilities, weighing which version of reality makes the most sense given what it expects, what it remembers, what it needs, and what it is sensing. And when one interpretation fits well enough, your brain commits to it, suppressing alternatives and presenting the chosen model as your conscious experience. And this commitment feels like certainty, not because the brain has proven that its model is objectively true, but because it has found a model that is internally consistent and useful. And once that happens, your experience becomes stable, solid, and difficult to question. This is why even mistaken perceptions can feel undeniable. A shadow can become a person in the dark, a sound can become a threat, a coincidence can become a sign, and in each case the experience does not feel tentative, it feels real, complete, and urgent. Because your brain has locked onto a prediction that fits its internal model well enough, and your body responds accordingly, preparing for action, narrowing attention, changing heart rate, shifting posture, as if the predicted reality were already confirmed. Your brain's internal models are not neutral, they are shaped by your biology, your personal history, your culture, your language, your fears, and your hopes, and these influences quietly sculpt what feels plausible and what feels impossible, what feels familiar and what feels strange. And because your brain uses these models to interpret every sensory signal, your past is always present in your perception, influencing what you notice, what you ignore, and what you assume, which means that your experience of the world is always a blend of what is happening now and what has happened to you before. This blending creates the powerful feeling that the world is simply revealing itself to you, when in fact your brain is actively organizing it, deciding what counts as an object, what counts as a person, what counts as a threat, what counts as an opportunity. And these decisions happen so quickly and so automatically that they feel like properties of the world itself rather than interpretations imposed upon it, which is why two people can look at the same situation and see entirely different realities, both of which feel equally obvious and equally real to the person experiencing them. Even your sense of physical presence is shaped by this internal prioritization. Your brain predicts the position of your limbs, the pressure on your skin, the rhythm of your breath, the beat of your heart, and these predictions create a feeling of being a body that exists here and now. And when those predictions are disrupted, as in certain illusions or neurological conditions, your sense of embodiment can shift dramatically, showing that the feeling of having a body is not a direct reading of physical signals, but a constructed experience maintained by predictive models. Your emotions play a central role in giving your perceptions their sense of reality. Because emotions are not just reactions to what you perceive, they are predictions about what matters. Fear predicts danger, joy predicts safety, sadness predicts loss, anger predicts injustice. And these emotional predictions bias your perception toward certain interpretations of the world, making some possibilities feel more real than others. And when emotion strongly supports a particular interpretation, your experience can feel especially vivid and convincing, even in the absence of strong sensory evidence. This is why stress can make the world feel threatening, why depression can make it feel empty, why love can make it feel meaningful, and why hope can make it feel full of possibility. Your brain is not simply reflecting reality, it is weighting it. Coloring it and organizing it according to what it believes is important for your survival and well-being. And because these weightings happen below awareness, the resulting world feels like a given rather than a creation. Over time, your brain learns which internal stories tend to work, which predictions are often confirmed, and which interpretations keep you safe, and it gradually strengthens those models, making them easier to activate and harder to question. And this learning creates the sense that the world has a certain fixed nature, that people are a certain way, that you are a certain kind of person, that life has a certain shape. Even though these are all models that have been reinforced through repeated confirmation rather than objective truths that exist independently of your experience. Once you begin to see that the feeling of reality arises from the brain's internal confidence rather than from direct access to the world, you start to understand why changing your expectations can change your experience, why reframing a situation can alter how it feels, and why your inner state can quietly reshape the world you live in. Because what feels real to you is not just what is happening around you. It is what your brain has decided to believe in at that moment, What you call your identity feels like a solid and continuous thing, a stable core that moves through time carrying memories, values, preferences, fears, and desires. But beneath this familiar sense of me is a far more fluid and constructed process, because your brain is not discovering a fixed self. It is constantly assembling a working model of who you are in order to predict what you will do next, what you will want next, and what will matter to you next. And this self-model becomes the reference point around which your personal reality is organized. From the inside, this model feels like a real inner observer, a thinker behind your thoughts, a door behind your actions. But when you look more closely, what you find are layers of predictions, memories, and expectations interacting with bodily signals and environmental cues, creating a sense of continuity that feels like a permanent you. Even though the components of that self are always changing, and the brain hides this change by weaving experiences into a coherent narrative that feels stable, familiar, and personal. Meaning arises from this same narrative process. Events do not come preloaded with significance. Your brain assigns meaning by linking what is happening now to what has happened before, to what you care about, and to what you expect might happen next. And this linking transforms neutral occurrences into personal stories, turning sounds into voices, faces into friends or strangers, moments into memories, and sequences of events into chapters of your life. And because this meaning making is automatic and continuous, your life feels like a story that is unfolding rather than a series of unrelated moments. Certainty is another product of this neural storytelling. Because your brain prefers coherent narratives over ambiguous ones, it tends to settle on interpretations that fit well with your existing beliefs and emotional priorities. And once it has chosen a particular story about what is happening, that story feels solid, self-evident, and resistant to doubt, even when alternative interpretations are equally possible. And this gives you the comforting sense that you know what is going on, who you are, and what things mean, even though these are constructions that your brain has selected rather than objective truths that exist independently of you. Your memories play a powerful role in reinforcing this sense of identity and meaning. But memories themselves are not fixed recordings. They are reconstructions that change each time you revisit them, subtly updated to fit your current beliefs and emotional state. And through this process, your brain continuously edits your personal history, smoothing inconsistencies, strengthening certain themes, and quietly shaping your self-story so that your past feels like a coherent narrative that explains who you are now, even though it is always being rewritten to support your present sense of self. Language further deepens this storytelling process by giving you labels, categories, and explanations that feel precise and stable. Your brain can package complex experiences into simple concepts, turning fluid emotional states into named feelings, turning dynamic social interactions into fixed roles, and turning ongoing personal change into a stable identity. And once these concepts become part of your inner narrative, they influence what you notice, how you interpret events, and how you describe yourself and others, strengthening the feeling that there is a clear and definite reality behind your experiences. This neural storytelling does not only define who you think you are, it also shapes how you see other people and the world, because your brain uses similar models to predict what others will do, what they mean, and what they intend. And these predictions become your social reality, determining who feels trustworthy, who feels threatening, who feels familiar, and who feels distant. And because these social models are influenced by your past experiences, culture, and emotions, they can differ dramatically from person to person, even when everyone is observing the same external situation. Over time, these stories can become so deeply ingrained that they feel like the natural structure of reality itself. Beliefs about success, failure, worth, love, danger, and belonging can harden into unquestioned assumptions, quietly guiding your decisions and shaping your emotional responses. And because they feel like descriptions of how things really are rather than interpretations, they can be difficult to examine or revise, even when they are causing suffering or limiting your possibilities. Yet the fact that your identity, meaning, and certainty are constructed through neural storytelling also means that they are not fixed. The same predictive machinery that built your current self-story can gradually build a different one. Through new experiences, new interpretations, and new ways of relating to your thoughts and emotions. And this capacity for revision is what allows growth, healing, and change, even though from the inside it can feel as if you are simply discovering new truths about yourself rather than actively reshaping the story your brain is telling. When you begin to see your sense of self and your sense of meaning as products of an ongoing internal narrative, rather than as permanent features of reality, you gain a subtle but powerful freedom because you realize that what feels certain is not necessarily what is true. What feels like who you are is not necessarily who you must remain. And what feels like the fixed structure of your world is in many ways the current version of a story that your brain is continuously writing and revising. What you call your identity feels like a solid and continuous thing, a stable core that moves through time, carrying memories, values, preferences, fears, and desires, but beneath this familiar sense of me is a far more fluid and constructed process because your brain is not discovering a fixed self. It is constantly assembling a working model of who you are in order to predict what you will do next, what you will want next, and what will matter to you next. And this self-model becomes the reference point around which your personal reality is organized. From the inside, this model feels like a real inner observer, a thinker behind your thoughts, a door behind your actions. But when you look more closely, what you find are layers of predictions, memories, and expectations interacting with bodily signals and environmental cues, creating a sense of continuity that feels like a permanent even though the components of that self are always changing. And the brain hides this change by weaving experiences into a coherent narrative that feels stable, familiar, and personal. Meaning arises from this same narrative process. Events do not come preloaded with significance. Your brain assigns meaning by linking what is happening now to what has happened before, to what you care about, and to what you expect might happen next. And this linking transforms neutral occurrences into personal stories, turning sounds into voices, faces into friends or strangers, moments into memories, and sequences of events into chapters of your life. And because this making is automatic and continuous, your life feels like a story that is unfolding rather than a series of unrelated moments. Certainty is another product of this neural storytelling. Because your brain prefers coherent narratives over ambiguous ones, it tends to settle on interpretations that fit well with your existing beliefs and emotional priorities. And once it has chosen a particular story about what is happening, that story feels solid, self-evident, and resistant to doubt, even when alternative interpretations are equally possible. And this gives you the comforting sense that you know what is going on, who you are, and what things mean, even though these are constructions that your brain has selected rather than objective truths that exist independently of you. Your memories play a powerful role in reinforcing this sense of identity and meaning. But memories themselves are not fixed recordings. They are reconstructions that change each time you revisit them, subtly updated to fit your current beliefs and emotional state. And through this process, your brain continuously edits your personal history, smoothing inconsistencies, strengthening certain themes, and quietly shaping your self-story so that your past feels like a coherent narrative that explains who you are now, even though it is always being rewritten to support your present sense of self. Language further deepens this storytelling process by giving you labels, categories, and explanations that feel precise and stable. Your brain can package complex experiences into simple concepts, turning fluid emotional states into named feelings, turning dynamic social interactions into fixed roles, and turning ongoing personal change into a stable identity. And once these concepts become part of your inner narrative, they influence what you notice, how you interpret events, and how you describe yourself and others, strengthening the feeling that there is a clear and definite reality behind your experiences. This neural storytelling does not only define who you think you are, it also shapes how you see other people and the world, because your brain uses similar models to predict what others will do, what they mean, and what they intend. And these predictions become your social reality, determining who feels trustworthy, who feels threatening, who feels familiar, and who feels distant. And because these social models are influenced by your past experiences, culture, and emotions, they can differ dramatically from person to person, even when everyone is observing the same external situation. Over time, these stories can become so deeply ingrained that they feel like the natural structure of reality itself. Beliefs about success, failure, worth, love, danger, and belonging can harden into unquestioned assumptions, quietly guiding your decisions and shaping your emotional responses. And because they feel like descriptions of how things really are rather than interpretations, they can be difficult to examine or revise, even when they are causing suffering or limiting your possibilities. Yet the fact that your identity, meaning, and certainty are constructed through neural storytelling also means that they are not fixed. The same predictive machinery that built your current self, story can gradually build a different one through new experiences, new interpretations, and new ways of relating to your thoughts and emotions. And this capacity for revision is what allows growth, healing, and change, even though from the inside it can feel as if you are simply discovering new truths about yourself rather than actively reshaping the story your brain is telling. Once you begin to realize that the world you experience is not simply revealed to you, but actively generated within you, something you have quietly assumed your entire life starts to loosen, because reality no longer feels like a fixed stage you are walking across and begins to feel more like a living relationship between your brain and the environment. And this shift does not make the world disappear. It changes how you stand within it, how you interpret it, and how you respond to it. Fear is one of the first things to change, because fear depends on prediction. It is your brain's way of preparing you for what it believes is about to happen. And when you understand that your perception of threat is built from internal models rather than direct access to danger itself, you begin to see that not every alarming feeling is evidence of an alarming reality. And this creates a small but powerful space between sensation and belief, a space in which you can pause, breathe, and question whether the story your brain is telling is the only story available. Belief itself begins to look different, because beliefs are no longer just opinions you hold, they are prediction engines that quietly sculpt what you notice, what you remember, and what you interpret as meaningful. And when you see that your beliefs are shaping your reality from the inside out, you realize that changing a belief is not merely changing your mind, it is changing the world you live in. Because the same street, the same people, the same events can feel radically different when they are filtered through a different internal model. Conflict also takes on a new light, because disagreements are no longer simply clashes of facts, they are clashes of internal worlds, each shaped by different histories, emotions, and expectations. And when you recognize that another person is not just wrong, but is living inside a different, constructed reality, your response can soften, not because you abandon your own perspective, but because you see that certainty itself is something their brain is generating just as yours is. And this understanding can open a door to curiosity where there was once only defensiveness. Your relationship with yourself begins to shift as well. Because if your identity is part of a constructed story, then your limitations, your fears, and your self-judgments are also parts of that story, not fixed truths carved into the structure of reality. And this creates the possibility of change that feels deeper than simple motivation, because it touches the level at which your brain is predicting who you are and what you are capable of. And when those predictions begin to soften, new behaviors and new emotional experiences can quietly become possible. Even suffering can start to change in quality, because while pain is real, the meaning you attach to it is constructed, and meaning determines whether pain feels like punishment, failure, danger, or growth. And when you understand that meaning is something your brain is generating, you can begin to relate to pain differently, not by denying it, but by noticing the stories that wrap around it and gently questioning whether those stories are helping or harming you. This understanding also reshapes how you relate to uncertainty, because uncertainty is no longer simply the absence of knowledge. It is the natural state of a world that your brain is always approximating rather than fully capturing. And when you stop demanding absolute certainty from your experience, you can become more flexible, more curious, and less rigid in your interpretations, allowing your internal models to update instead of defending them as if they were the world itself. Your sense of control also changes because while you may not be able to choose every prediction your brain makes, you can influence the conditions under which those predictions are formed through the environments you place yourself in, the narratives you consume, the people you surround yourself with, and the interpretations you practice. And over time, these influences can reshape the internal models that generate your reality, subtly altering how the world feels to you. When you truly absorb that reality is something your brain is actively creating, you begin to live with a different kind of responsibility. Not the heavy responsibility of controlling everything, but the quiet responsibility of tending to the internal world that shapes your experience of the external one. Paying attention to the stories you are reinforcing, the fears you are feeding, and the meanings you are assigning, knowing that these are not just thoughts, they are the architecture of the world you live in. This does not make life less real. It makes it more intimate, because every moment you experience becomes a collaboration between your nervous system and the world around you, and this collaboration is where your reality is born renewed and revised moment by moment.